Well, welcome to the podcast. And yes, as I promised at the start of the year, I told you I'd go all over the world to get the best speakers so we can learn the most from them. I didn't go that far, I'll be honest, this time. I've gone to Adelaide, which is sort of southwest from Sydney. It's in Australia. It's a beautiful part of Australia, known for its wine and known for lots of other things. Today, we have a fantastic guest. He is, I don't know what you'd call him in the real world, but he is a counterterrorism specialist. He's an ex-police officer. Today, he trains everyone from 10-year-olds to middle management on optimum performance. And we're going to get into a bit of that today because it is very, very important as we start to come out of COVID, what is happening in our world and how we can actually excel in what we do in business. Welcome to the podcast, Derrick McManus. How are you?
Rob, great to be here. It's absolutely sensational. And I'll just say that it's nice to be here in Adelaide and not in Sydney where you are. I'm nice and dry. I understand you guys are getting a drenching at the moment.
Yes, we've got a massive low sitting off the coast of Sydney, and I'm an hour out of Sydney, and we're getting about 200 mils in 24 hours. So it's a little wet.
Yeah. I was going to say it'd be good for the gardens, but no, that's not even good for the gardens. It's not good for the crops.
We have those naughty mushrooms at the moment growing everywhere, which aren't good for anybody or anything to eat.
Yeah.
So are you originally from Adelaide?
No, I was born in Scotland. I came out with 3, and as I like to quip to everybody, I brought my parents with me. Came out from Scotland when I was 3 and have lived in Adelaide ever since.
Beautiful place. And you were at school, you spent so many years in the police force and special operations. Is that like every child growing, especially boys, says I want to be a fireman, a race car driver, or a policeman?
Yeah.
Were you always wanted to be a policeman?
I always said I did, and I'll be completely honest here. The first reason that I said I wanted to be a police officer is because my brother, 2 years older than me, he was my hero. Anything Brian did, I wanted to do what Brian did. He said he wanted to be a police officer, and I've gone, I want to be a police officer too. And then everybody said, you only want to be a police officer because Brian does. And I've gone, no. He changed his mind. He became a butcher, and I didn't want to eat my words. So I became a police officer and loved it. I have loved my career as a police officer. I'm loving what I'm doing now more. To a large degree. I'm, as you can imagine, being the special operations area, I'm an adrenaline junkie. Just love the challenge, and it's challenge more than adrenaline. So this new role that I've taken on in speaking and training, it is just a new challenge, and I'm just really enjoying it as well.
They say that everyone has 3 careers, and when you look back at it, a lot of us do. If you go back to when you first started and you first joined the police force, what was it like as a young fella? And you would have had some really cranky, grumpy sergeants that treated you like absolute rubbish.
They were shockers.
Yeah.
I remember there was one guy, Fred Knight, who was on the front gate of the police academy, and we had to be back in by midnight on Sunday, and we had one night out a week, and we had to be back in by midnight, and if you're late, blah, blah, blah. And you talk to Fred on the gate, and he was quite friendly, and I've seen other people talk to him around the academy, and they were calling him by his first name. And as a very junior cadet, I was working in the canteen, and he's come into the canteen, and I said, "Oh, hi, Fred, what can I get for you?" He berated me. "I am Senior Constable Knight to you, and if you don't call me by my right," because he was in some public arena and everybody was watching, and oh my gosh, did I wear it. And it was that sort of thing right throughout, very militant. There was good things that I learned from that militaristic type environment, but regimentation is not something that I take too easily. I'm more of a lateral thinker, a problem solver, and I don't want to just go to the letter of the law because you have told me, my boss has told me. I'll always question, okay, you've told me to do this, but why? I need to understand the reasoning behind. And in that militaristic type arena, that's not popular. You don't ask questions. You are told and you do. So it was a challenge for me in much of my career. It was a challenge for many of my bosses as well. But once I got into Star Group, it became a very diffused level of leadership. We certainly had our bosses, but when we went into the field and we were operating on our own, it wasn't a matter of being on the radio and going, hey, listen, I'm thinking of moving another 5 meters to the left here, and here's an opportunity to arrest an offender. He's come out of the back door. Do you think no, you're expected to be able to make decisions and take action instantly.
I think there's some people today that would think that's how it should be done. And
it's how it always should be done. Decentralization of authority is all how it should be done. When we're in a learning phase, when we're brand new, when we're not experienced, yes, we've got to take guidance, but we should be empowering people to be able to make decisions and take action, expecting that at some stage they might get it wrong. But if they've got the right intentions, most of the time they're going to be on track. If they do happen to get it wrong, we've got to make it really clear to them that as much as they've got it wrong, we need to have a discussion so we can get it back on track. First few times you are not going to be in trouble. It's just a discussion. If you keep on doing it for weeks and months, yeah, okay, different discussion. But we've got to empower people to make decisions and take action. Otherwise, as managers, we've got to micromanage every little bit. And we don't need to do that. That slows down progress.
We might touch on micromanagement a little bit later. I spoke with a gentleman who was 26 years in the New South Wales police force.
Yeah.
And he told me, he said, when he was in a tough situation, he relied on body language incredibly when he approached someone and he said, I would look him in the eyes. He said, I might have been carrying a shotgun or might have been wearing my pips or whatever the situation. He said, but I always looked in their eyes. He said, I knew in their eyes, I knew if I could reason with them.
Yep.
And he said, within 30 seconds to a minute, I made my mind up and either made the decision which way or the other. Would you say that's true? I mean, that's true in business. We can read people when you open your eyes and your ears in business. Do you think that was still the same when you were a policeman?
So it depends on the environment you're in. Where it's a high pressure environment and everybody's under high stress, they have less opportunity to second guess and put on a facade. So in that high stress, high pressure environment, yes, people are down to their basics. You can tell what their intention is. In business, people who know things about body language are able to hide their tells, or they're able to portray tells that are not correct. So we've got to be very, very careful in that arena. But generally speaking, yes, most people who are just open and having a discussion with you, having a debate with you about something, and if they're just being natural, yes, you can kind of tell whether they're going to be reasonable or whether they're going to be unreasonable, whether you can have a conversation with them or whatever it might be.
Now, was there ever
got to be that little bit cautious with it?
Was there ever a time where it went all horribly wrong?
Oh, yes, several. There was, I don't know how to tell this story quickly. There was an incident down at the Jeps Cross Hotel where my partner and I, 20 past midnight, we pulled a car over. They had drugs on the center console, and I'll make this story as short and succinct as I can. They had drugs on the center console. We've got them out of the car, and they're quite reasonable, not all that happy, but quite reasonable. And as I pulled them out of the car, I'm on the passenger side with the female. And I said, listen, we need to search the car because there's drugs there. And instantly she's just lost it and got back into the car and sat with the feet outside, but sitting on the passenger seat. And as it turned out, she was sitting on her handbag. And I'm trying to reason with her saying, yes, I am going to search the car. You can't stop me. I have the authority, blah, blah, blah. If you don't let me, I'm going to arrest you. Long story short, I ended up arresting her, pulling her out of the car, started putting handcuffs on her. The driver has also got back into the car, but he is actually saying to the female, listen, do what the police tell you to do, comply. And it sounded like he was helping us. Right. And so my partner has allowed this to continue. But what happened is when I've pulled her out of the car and I've started to handcuff her, he's reached into the handbag she was sitting on. He's pulled out a gun, pointed it at my partner's chest and started pulling the trigger. Now, Fortunately, the gun was broken and the hammer had to be pulled back so it would be able to fire. So the gun's broken. He's pulling the trigger. It's not working. My partner's got into a wrestling match with him. He's called out to me. He's got a gun. He's got a gun. I've jumped into the car, got him in a headlock, and held on to the wrist that's holding the gun just so we can control it. And halfway through this, he's called out to his girlfriend, cock the gun. So she's climbed over the top. She's pulled the hammer back. And at the time she's pulled the hammer back, I've put my thumb between the hammer and the gun to hold the hammer back to stop it from firing. Other police have then arrived, and he's eventually given up and we've arrested him and nobody got hurt. I had a sore thumb. So we thought we had the situation under control. We thought we could read these people, but they were just possuming along so that he could get that gun.
So I mean, we've all been in that in business as well, where we've thought we're in control of a sale, control of a situation, and it can spiral so quickly. You made a decision at one stage to leave the police force to go and do what you do now.
Yep.
Was there something that happened? Did you get shot at? Was there an incident that sort of crystallized that you wanted to go and do something different?
Okay, so I know where you're going with the question. The reason I left the police force is because I got old. So I retired. I retired at 59.
Yep.
The incident that you're talking, that everybody seems to think that, and quite rightly so for the majority of people, that after a major incident like I went through, that would stop you, you would leave the police department and you would go and do something else.
No.
So the incident itself happened in 1994. I retired in 2018. So almost 3.5 years ago now. So in 1994, I was in Star Group, Special Task and Rescue, High Risk Arrest, Hostage Siege, Counter-Terrorism. We went out to arrest a guy who was designated as high risk. We knew there was a potential for him to get violent. We went out to arrest him, and he made it very clear that he didn't want to be arrested. He started shooting with a SKK 7.62 rifle, and he fired 18 times and hit me 14 times with either bullets or shrapnel. I had major injuries, bleeding profusely. And then I was lying on the ground for 3 hours before my extraction team could get to me and get me out. When the extraction team came in, they were in an extremely dangerous, precarious situation. And, you know, even if I had died and been able to come back and do a review of the incident, if you can get your head around that, I would have said that at the time they came in, it was illogical for them to come in because it was just way too dangerous. But that's the type of people that I was working with in Star Group, absolutely dedicated to looking after each other. So they came in and got me. I got out. I got to doctors, and the first doctor to get to me said that when he first saw me, he didn't know whether I was dead or alive. He said there was no movement, there was no color in my skin, I wasn't breathing, and I wasn't making any sound. And he thought to himself, he's probably dead already. I won't even bother taking a look. Now, I had this discussion with him about 3 or 4 months after the shooting. And when he told me this, I've gone, pardon? You thought you wouldn't even take a look? Pardon? But then he said, I took a last gasping breath and there was a flicker of my eyelid. And he thought, I may as well at least take a look. I've gone, oh, thanks very much for that.
Yeah.
What he didn't tell me was he was standing in direct line of fire. Bullets were still whizzing around his ears. This is a doctor. It's not a police officer. It's not somebody expected to put their life on the line. But he made a decision to do the job that he'd been asked to do to the best of his ability, and he dedicated it, and he treated me for 10 minutes in direct line of fire. And if it wasn't for him treating me, he said that I was, in his estimation, I was probably about 30 seconds from death.
Wow.
And he actually later said that all the textbooks say that my heart should have stopped, and he doesn't know why it stopped. All the textbooks say it should have. He says the only reason it probably didn't stop is I hadn't read the textbooks. So I'm quite happy not to have read those. So I went through 2.5 years of rehabilitation, and people thought, doctors predicted I'd never be able to walk properly again. So if I can't walk properly again, everybody expected me never to go back to the police, never ever to go back to Star Group. But again, long story short, because we've got a limited amount of time and lots of other things that we want to talk about, I defied all those odds, and I physically went back to Star Group on full duties, no restrictions, and finished my career on full duties, no restrictions, back to fully operational. So people are amazed with the injuries I had, and I can list them for you, but just massive injuries. In fact, I still only got 20% of an Achilles tendon, but still able to run, jump, climb out of helicopters, abseil, all that sort of stuff. But the more amazing thing than the physical recovery is that I had no PTSD, no anxiety, no stress in relation to the shooting ever. One of the best things that I ever did, and this is a great message to men with you were talking to somebody else about Vaughan Granger, you were talking to about successful men, what makes men successful. One of the things I think we need to do as men is take a look at how we manage our mental health.
True.
And now this shooting happened 30 years ago. And you can imagine what men's attitude to psychologists, psychiatrists, and therapy was back then.
Yeah.
And I was in the special forces, right? These are toughest of tough men. And just about 6 days after the shooting, I threw my hand in the air and said, get me a psych. I want to talk to a psych. Best thing I ever did. I didn't think I had a problem. I didn't think I was weak or anything else. All I wanted to do was pick his brain about what can I anticipate will happen to me in the future. People going through these incidents, they have had nightmares, they've had flashbacks, they've had traumas. I want to know what those things are and how I can best prepare myself for them. And this has been a theme of my life, and it's probably one of the reasons I survived the shooting, is that I did that with the shooting as well. But I went and talked to the psychiatrist, and on the first meeting, just 3 months after the shooting, we had about a 3-hour discussion. He was picking my brains about what was happening inside my head. I was picking his brains about what might happen in the future. And at the end of that 3 hours, he said, Derrick, psychologically, you can go back to work tomorrow and you never need to come and see me again unless you want to. Now, that was unheard of back in the day. Everybody expected me to be in therapy for decades and never go back to work. But he cleared me psychologically to go back to work the next day. And this is where this idea of human durability has come from for me. It's not about being resilient and bouncing back. That's always an important skill to have. It's about how do we anticipate what our challenges might be and then prepare ourselves to sustain an optimal performance, right? And it's the optimal. It's not sustain a peak performance. We can't do that because that leads to burnout. But what's optimal for the circumstances you're in? So I looked at the fact that I may get shot, I may be injured, and in those circumstances, what can I do to sustain optimal so that I can get back to a place where I can start getting fit and healthy again?
Yeah, look, the reason I was digging so much into that is because it has set you up for what you do now.
Absolutely.
And it's the training and it's the mindset, it's the choices you've made. You could have been a victim, you could have sat behind it. But I've also seen the same qualities in a lot of returned SAS soldiers.
Yep.
And I do know a few special ops and police that have gone to that next level. And when they're in a situation, you see their eyes focus, you see their face tightens, but not for stress. You can see all of a sudden they pick it up. So what I'm going to ask you is, you were working in a high stakes, basically life and death situations. You had to keep your stress level down. I'm noticing more and more since we've come out of COVID, we're seeing the opposite in business. We're seeing managers, I don't call them leaders, managers struggling because they don't have control anymore. They're struggling with high stakes, and we've got to get our business back up and running. We have to get these sales. We have to get our performance up. And as they do it, they're increasing the stress levels in their businesses.
Yep.
And then at the same time, I'm seeing employees being precious. And I don't mean that in a bad way, because they've been working from home for nearly 2 years, or the majority of it. They're not used to someone saying, you can't do this, you should do that. And so we're starting to we may have high stakes businesses, but the stress levels are starting to rise. So what I'm going to ask you is, in a general business, how does someone get optimum performance out of a business that is high stakes? Because most of these businesses now in the next 12 months will fold or flourish, but don't stress out the people who work for you and burn them out. How are we going to do it?
So there's a few things that we can do. The first one is that we've got to have open, honest, confronting conversations with ourselves before we have conversations with anybody else. Now, when I say confronting conversations, that's not aggressive. It's confronting is just addressing the actual situation. It's not living in the sort of dreamland of, oh, do we want to talk about this? Don't we want to? That's kind of uncomfortable. No, let's just have an open conversation about it. And it's confronting done with care, compassion, concern, and self-compassion, understanding where we are. But it's got to actually address the situation. It's not just got to allude to it. It's actually got to address it. And that's really important, because once we're clear of what's going on, then we can have open, honest, confronting conversations with other people. Now, when we have the conversations with care, concern with other people, it actually puts them in the position where they have as much information as you do, and they're more comfortable, and they have a connection and a trust with that leader that they are being honest with them. And they do know all the information. And if something is going to go well, they're going to be informed. If it's going to go bad, at least they're forewarned. And it builds up that area of trust in them. But the open, honest, confronting conversations has to be had with ourselves at every stage of what we do. Because Nelson Mandela actually says, we can't prepare for the future while secretly pretending it's not going to happen. If we're secretly pretending or putting it in a corner and saying, well, I know it's possible, but I don't want to think about it. It's too scary. If that happens, it's going to destroy us. Okay, so we've got to have that open conversation. And this is what I did in relation to the shooting. 5 years before the shooting happened, I actually had a conversation with my now ex-wife, and I said, going into Star Group, real possibility I may be shot and injured, I may be shot and killed. And we had a confronting conversation about what that would mean for her. It wasn't just about me. Let's have a conversation. What will it mean for you? And it wasn't about me giving her permission to get married or stay single or demanding. It was about letting her know that I support whatever she wants to do. What she thinks is right for her and the children is what she should do. Rather than have her going, Derrick's dead. What would he have wanted me to do? Would he have wanted me to stay single and dedicate myself to the children? All those sorts of things. So it was a confronting conversation, but it was done with care and compassion.
Well, mate, that's really interesting. It's amazing how you've been able to have that very honest conversation with your wife about what could not or could happen in your new job back then. If we fast forward to today, and a business person comes to you and said, look, we're trying to get our business back up and running. We want to be a high-performing business. Now that COVID's gone, we have to get back to the sales revenue and the business revenue we were doing. But the more we push our employees, we've noticed the stress level is starting to rise. And that's not good in business. How do you get a high-performing business without a lot of stress on your employees?
So a lot of this comes down to that same open, honest, confronting conversations, because we have some managers, not leaders, as you pointed out before, and they like to manage and they think, I'm going to keep a secret. I won't tell them. They'll never know. People know. They get the feel. They know when you're being open about everything. And if you're hiding something, they go, oh, this is the same as before, same actions. I know he's hiding something. So then that builds up doubt. That doubt builds uncertainty, and that builds up stress. Now, if you've got a really good leader, they're able to have that open, honest, confronting conversation, and confronting done with care, compassion, concern, but openness about the reality of the situation. And some of it will be about, okay, I know that this is the situation. This is where we're going. These are the challenges we have. These are the plans that we have in place to manage them. Now that actually takes the stress out of the staff. They go, okay, so there is a plan to follow, because I've got 5 drivers for success, and one of those drivers is planning, and it's taken the uncertainty out of the future. There's no guarantee of success, but it gives you that some certainty that there is a process we can follow that gives us a sense of optimism for the future. So we've got to have that open, honest, confronting conversation, and just deal with the reality. But it is about building up that trust, and it does go back to letting people know that we're going to take responsibility for our choices. We're going to take responsibility for the action, for the consequence, and whichever way it goes, absolutely sensationally, excellent. This is what's going to happen. We're all going to be able to benefit from it. But if it goes absolutely terrible, we know what the future is going to look like. It may be a struggle for a while. I want you to know that up front. It may be, but we are going to have a plan in place to manage it, right? And I want you to be confident about it. Now that takes the stress out. There's no uncertainty. There's no ambiguity. There's no, just the uncertainty. And so that builds up the trust, and that helps to build a high performance team. But it's also about building a culture of pride in that organization. And that's one of the things that we really did well at Star Group. Star Group was bigger than the individual, right? If I did something in my career while I was in Star Group that was embarrassing for me, that's one thing. But if I did something that embarrassed the section, oh my gosh, that was a nightmare. That's how much pride I felt in being in that section. I wanted the section to look good, and everybody in the section wanted the section to look good. Now, when I went back into general patrols, everybody still wants the police department to look good. But if you do something embarrassing and it embarrasses the police department, there's less of an impetus to go, But in Star Group, we had so much pride that drove our behaviours to the next level up. I wanted to not just look good, I want the section to look good as well as a result of my behaviours. And if you can get that culture within an organisation, that drives a high performance team. And that pride of knowing that everybody else around you is high performance as well takes a little bit of the stress out of it.
Yeah, Jocko Willink, who is a former Navy SEAL, and anyone who follows, I think it's 100% Accountability or something like that is his book. It's an amazing book. He does something similar to what you do now. And he says he tries to instill into businesses, when business wins, everyone wins. If something goes wrong, it gets over everybody. He said it's because he needs high-performing businesses. You've got to build the trust. So it's very similar to what you speak about. When you're trying to get that back into a business, is it easy to work with one or two managers and let them bring it down to the people who work for them? Or is it better to get the whole team in together and move forward as a team and instill that culture as one?
Really depends on where the unit is at the time. It is something that needs to be led by the top, but everybody needs to be involved in it. But the top needs to show vulnerability that I apologize, I made a mistake, and that makes you who work here, maybe a little bit disregarded or less regarded. And as soon as you start showing that vulnerability and then asking everybody to come up and meet your standards and then supporting them to do that, it's not just making a demand of them, it's supporting them, then that encourages that. But one of the other things that we need to do is have a sense of understanding that people make mistakes. Now, in Star Group, we had different levels of mistakes you could make. If you made a mistake at the highest level when you embarrassed the whole section, then you paid highly for it. Nobody made a joke about it. You went and saw the loss, and there was trouble to pay. But if you made a mistake on a lower level, and this could be that, and these things happen every day, right? So you're driving the car and somebody just bumps into you in the car. Okay, well, that's going to cost you. I don't care whether it was their fault or not. That's going to cost you. You're going to buy buns for everybody else, right? And that's that element of, oh my gosh, I messed up because I was involved in an accident, and so I've got to pay the price. It makes you just that little bit more cautious, but it also makes people lift their standard as well. But this could be right down to, I was walking down the path and I trip over. I had a piece of equipment and I drop it at the wrong time. Okay, you're going to pay buns for that. Now, it was called the Buns Act. So if you make small mistakes, you pay. Now, the other side, the extra side to that is that if you did something silly, or if somebody accused you of doing something silly and said you need to pay buns for that, you could appeal, right? And they would have a mock trial that you could appeal.
Yep.
But it was well known that it was a kangaroo court with a hanging judge, and the jury was bribed to find the verdict in a certain way. So, you could, and it was just part of the fun. Everybody knew that they were going to pay buns, but I'm not going to pay buns easily. So it was all part of that culture of high performance. You've got to be able to have fun within it, right? That helps people to lift their performance, understand what those standards are. But if it was a serious mistake where I did something, arrested the wrong person, or something like that, then it would be into the boss's office. Nobody would make jokes about it. There would be no sticky buns. It would be, okay, this is serious.
Yeah.
And it's treated.
Have you ever had a situation where senior management wants, high performing, low stress, and they've called you in, and staff are on board, but there's always that middle manager who may have been overlooked. He's been there a long time. He hasn't moved with the times.
Yeah.
He's, say, 5 years from retirement, and he's like a bun. He is going to sit there and he's going to make your job as a facilitator and somebody who wants to move this company forward really, really hard. How do you approach that when you have someone who is being obstructionist, as we call?
Part of that is anticipating that there is always going to be one or two like that. A lot of it is about removing the uncertainty for them. There's I'm trying to think of his name. Rogers is a psychologist that created a model of change.
Yep.
As a bell curve where you've got innovators at one end.
Yes. Yeah, I know the one you mean.
Yep. And those guys at the other end who just, no matter what you do, they are not going to change. And there's a whole range of movement between there.
Yes.
And these people on this end, you've got to anticipate they're going to be there and just kind of accept that there's going to be one or two that are going to bog it down. Not everybody's going to get on board with everything.
No.
I like to see myself as one of the fast adapters, innovators, but I know there are some things that come up and I just go, oh, I'm not sure about that. I don't understand it. And I become one of those, and I can't think of the term for them now. There's the early adopters, the late adopters, and I
think they're 5% from memory.
Yeah, something like that. But I sometimes am that person who takes a little while longer to get on board.
Somebody actually called them dinosaurs, but
absolutely, absolutely, and that's a good description for them. But it's about removing the doubt for them, and people have, and you described it well because they're in the last 5 years of their career.
Yeah,
they don't want change. They don't want to take on anything difficult. They want that last 5 years to just be a really smooth ride. So it's about trying to work out how we can make this as easy as possible for them. Sometimes it doesn't work and we've got to work around that. And there's various ways of management being able to work around that. I don't like to see anybody being punished or belittled or moved involuntarily, but at the same time, we've got to make decisions that are best for the organisation.
Another one I've noticed, especially since we've started to come back out of COVID, is that, yes, we're getting into some stressful situations where everyone's got pressure to get their businesses back up and running to somewhere as close to as we can to pre-COVID profitability, sales. So the stress levels do start to rise. But some employees and some middle managers, as the stress level rises, they become like the phantom, ghosts, and they disappear. Or they shrink into the corner and stop giving input in meetings, and they struggle. Because the stress is so high in their minds, they don't know how to handle it, so they pull back and they become introverts. Now, in your police days, that could be fatal.
Oh, absolutely.
But in business, how do we handle those when we see those people who are disappearing, when people are looking to them for leadership and they've become managers who hide. And
Absolutely.
I've seen it myself firsthand.
Absolutely. Now, you describe it as in the police, it could be fatal. It's virtually the same for business because it could be fatal for the business.
Yes.
Right. So it's the same sort of thing. These are the people who, again, the emotions have gone high because they've lost control. They don't know what's going on. They're starting to get overwhelmed.
Yes.
Their uncertainty, it's volatile, it's ambiguous, it's complex what's going on. So rather than looking like silly people or idiots because they're making statements that people going, well, what, don't you really understand it? They shrink away and they'll just things happen around them, and hopefully they'll be able to go along with it. Again, that's about sitting down with them, having those open, honest, confronting conversations with them. Not just going, oh, I see what you're doing. I hope you'll get on board soon. It's not going to the whole organisation and saying, listen, we've got a few people in the organisation who are not fully on board. I want you to all get on board, hoping that this person will be listening to it and that message will get through to them, because that makes the rest of the organisation feel like, aren't I doing enough? Do you have my ability? And so the whole organisation sort of goes, we're having that talk again. Why don't they just go and talk to him? Right. So we need to address it. And again, it's about taking the VUCA out of everything, the volatility, the uncertainty, the ambiguity. And if they don't have, when you have the open, honest, confronting conversations, you can find out whether they believe they are lacking a skill or not. Because if it's open and honest, done with care, compassion, concern, from both sides are willing to go, okay, if we're having a conversation like that where I trust you, then I can say to you, listen, I'm not sure exactly what's happening here. I don't think I've got the skill to handle it. I want to. Can you give me a course? Can you give me some extra training? Is there a way around it? But if we just do the elephant in the corner, we don't want to talk about this person, it can be fatal for the business.
You brought up an interesting point there about training. Training in trades, training in the police force especially, and the armed forces is paramount to peak performance. For anything to, in Australia, for some reason, compared to America and the UK and Vietnam and these places, training's a dirty word. They don't invest. If you do like-for-like businesses around the world, outside of Australia, Australia and New Zealand are very poor when it comes to investing in their people compared to other countries and investing in training. You know firsthand how valuable training is, and so do I. How do we change that mindset in Australia especially? I mean, I know people living overseas listening to this podcast going, what? You know, we get heaps of training. Yeah. I say that to a boss in Australia and they go, oh, we can't do that. That'll cost me money.
There's the old cliche statement. You know, if I give my people training, they're going to become so good, they're going to leave.
Correct.
But what's the alternative? You don't give them training and they stay, right? But if you don't give them training and they stay, they're not an asset. They're a deterrent to the business, right? They're going to break the business down because they're not trained to be able to handle it. So it's getting your head around the fact that if you actually give them training and then incentives to stay, right? And that incentive does not need to be money all the time. Yes, sometimes it doesn't have to be money. Recognition goes a long way. Appreciation goes a long way. Having trust in the organisation is going to look after you, goes a long way. We didn't get paid exceptionally well in the police department for the risks we took, but we loved doing the job, right? I got paid exactly the same as another police officer doing regular general patrols or working in the front office. My risks were at a much higher level, but I loved the job. I got so much out of that job. I was willing to do it. So the rewards, recognition, the incentives don't have to be monetary, but they have to be there. People need to have something more for the effort they're going to put in.
Yeah, look, I couldn't agree more. I worked for a company and it was the best job I've ever had in all my life. We weren't that well paid and we worked twice as hard as the equivalent in other companies. But we worked hard. We played hard.
Yep.
When we went away for our conferences, we weren't allowed to put our hand in our pocket. And anything I needed by a tool of trade, I was given.
Yeah, right.
And we built a very, very close-knit group that performed 100% year-on-year increasing sales. Until the companies we represented, one of them especially, decided they could do better, cut the price of this product by $10, changed distribution, and did an amazing job of dropping their market share by 21%.
Oh, wow. Yeah, right. Okay.
Funny that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, you know, how important is it, for our second last question, is for a business to have fun?
Essential, in my mind, essential. It's got to be have fun. You've got to have fun in everything, even those confronting conversations I have with my wife. You may go on and get married, you may, stay single, or you may worship me, the fun is what we look for in life. If life isn't enjoyable, there's no reason for continuing on. And this is where people get into the mode of, taking their own life. There is no fun. There is no optimism. So it's essential for a business to be having fun for a period of time. It's not fun all the time. As you said, you work hard. You're really dedicated. And I know in Star Group, when we're in training, and going back to that training thing, we did 1 week of training in every 4. That's how intense our training was. That's how we were able to perform at that high level. A week of training, that was horrible. We were out in the hottest conditions or the wettest conditions, getting drenched or burning in the sun, pushing ourselves, sweating, muscles aching. I remember one training we were wearing gas masks and simulating a terrorist incident. So there is no let off of pressure. And the bosses are just going, right, the offenders are upstairs now. No, they're downstairs now. You're not able to use the lifts. You're going up and downstairs. We're wearing 30 kilos of body armor and weapons and all the rest of it, and gas masks, which restrict your ability to breathe. That was some of the, you can tell, I still feel it's one of the hardest trainings I went in. But we had a lot of fun in Star Group as well. When we had that downtime, everybody made sure that there was fun for everybody. And the rewards for the effort put in were definitely there.
Speaking of reward, Tanunda is in South Australia. It's one of the world's finest wine country. And I've been privileged to be there.
Yep.
If I booked your table at one of the beautiful wine tasting restaurants in the middle of Tanunda, and anyone who's listening, if you haven't been to this part of South Australia, if you come to Australia, you've got to go there. And I had you in 3 spots. Who would you invite to sit down and enjoy a nice Cabernet Sauvignon or a beautiful Semillon with a beautiful feed of cheese and ham and everything else? Who are you going to have?
Wow.
I love giving this question out, and I don't do it every podcast, so people never know when it's going to come up. It could be anybody, alive, dead.
Yeah, I see. I actually do a mentor identification exercise where it could be anybody alive or dead. So I immediately start thinking that. The first one would have to be Nelson Mandela.
Yep, he comes up a lot.
Yeah, he is just an amazing, amazing individual. Another one, and people will be surprised at this, I would love to sit down with Oprah.
Really?
Absolutely. She is just such an amazing woman. She's so insightful. She has her foibles as much as any of us do, but she's insightful, she's deep, she's considerate, she's thoughtful. She built her business, which was absolutely massive, by sitting down and having conversations with people.
Yeah.
What could I pick out of that brain about building my business, about creating my life? There's so much in there. Who else would it be? A third and last one.
So obviously someone who you think could enjoy a nice bottle of red.
Well, that'd have to be my dad. We do enjoy a bottle of red. But icons of the world.
It can be anyone. Doesn't have to be an icon.
I reckon Abe Lincoln.
Now that'd be interesting.
Yeah, that man went through so much in his life, bankruptcy so many times, in and out of Parliament, failed so many times at other things, had health problems, but still went on to be one of the most respected presidents in my mind.
So before we wind up, I'll give you a quick question here. If you had one message for business around the world as we come out of COVID and we start to go back to whatever the new normal will be, however that will look, what would you say to them so they can be a high-performing business, but a low-stress environment for their employees?
Forget where you have been. Forget everything that's happened, right? Put it in the past. Deal with the absolute present as it is right now. You can't change what's happened before. Accept the present as it is now. Do what you need to do to deal with it and manage forward. We learn from the past. Keep all those lessons, but forget that it's happened. It's not my business was there, I want to be there again. No. What are you doing right now to move forward? And that's about accepting responsibility for choices, actions, consequence, and the future afterwards from this point forward. And this is the same message that I give to people dealing with depression, anxiety, PTSD. About let's put the past in the back pocket for a little while. Where are you now? What do you need to do to get the next stage? And then to the next stage, and then to the next stage. And take incremental steps of improvement. Don't look for the massive ones. Look for the incremental ones, because you'll put incremental, day by day by day. And at the end of the month, people will be going, oh my God, that's a massive change. Just look for those incremental steps.
The 1%ers, as they say.
1%ers, yep, absolutely.
So Derrick, how do people get in touch with you if they want to find out a little bit more about what you do?
My website is always available, derrickmcmanus.com. There's another website, humandurability.com.
I'll make sure I leave that in the cut.
Yeah, please leave it in. I'm not embarrassed about that at all. First time I've ever stumbled on it. But humandurability.com.au. Yes, derrickmcmanus.com. Or just give me a phone call. My phone numbers are on the web all over the place. Give me a phone call, send me an email. I love having conversations with people about possibility. What's possible for you? And it doesn't have to be a committed discussion where it's going to be an outcome. But let's have a conversation. And if there's something that I can just share with you that'll make a difference for you, I'm very happy at that.
Mate, it's been a pleasure talking to you. I love how you're taking what you learned in the police force and now applying it to business. I think we need more of the people who have been through what you've done, bringing that into business now, because I think there's a little bit of loss of for our leaders. They a lot of them don't know where to go. And they need a little bit of focus and a little bit of guidance. It's been fantastic. And as we say at the end of every one of our podcasts, have a groovy day.
And I thank you for that. You have a great day as well.